The Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clint, I hope you noticed the accentuation there.
Yes, thank you.
First of all, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. First item on our agenda is consideration of the minutes from our meeting of July 6th as presented in our backup materials. Is there a motion regarding the minutes for July 6th meeting?
A motion to approve. Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, I'll approve it.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There we go. It has been moved and seconded, so it's now open for discussion. Are there any comments, questions, suggested changes regarding the minutes as presented? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. Motion carries. Going down our agenda, are there any new agenda items that need to be added at this time? We don't have any old business, so we'll move on to new business. The item listed under 5.1 was a resolution to consider the Plan Commission approval, and the Plan Commission approved that, tabled that item. The Redevelopment Commission tabled a related item to August 3rd, so I'll make a motion that we table this item to August 3rd.
Say make a motion.
I'm-
I'll second that.
So now it's been moved. Is there any discussion regarding that motion?
Yeah, what was the issue?
The issue?
Yeah, what was the issue? Was it canceled? Did they just not show? I mean, what happened?
Apparently there was a little bit of confusion, a misunderstanding, and they did not have a representative that attended either of those meetings to make a presentation, and most importantly, to answer questions, whether it's from members of the RDC or the Plan Commission regarding the project. I can't speak for them. I'm only assuming maybe they thought because they've made presentations to the council that somehow members of these other boards knew that. I don't know. But without somebody here to field questions, that's why it was tabled. Yes, the development. So, I can only hope that they'll have somebody here on August the 3rd and they can answer questions and make a presentation, and then folks will have the information that they need to consider whatever's being presented at that time. So that's my understanding, Angie. All those in favor of tabling that item to the August 3rd meeting, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Motion carries, and we will table that item to August 3rd. The next item on our agenda is a preliminary engineering report. And Jim, who will be presenting that?
Commonwealth will be.
I know we have a presenter, I see him. And we appreciate that you're here.
Well, thank you. I wouldn't miss it. My name's Al Stong. I'm with Commonwealth Engineers. I'm your project manager. And we were asked to assemble a preliminary engineering report in a format that we could submit to state revolving loan fund for funding consideration. Part of that process is to present the report in public and then request your permission to submit to the state revolving loan fund. So tonight, I'll introduce Megan Pintosi. She's one of the engineers with Commonwealth. She's going to present the contents of the preliminary engineering report, and then Jared Hall with Cronin Associates. He'll then present the potential rate impacts. And then what we'll do is we'll be asking the council for your permission to empower your council president or another designated signatory to go through the process of submitting to state revolving loan fund and to move forward with some of the design components. So with that, I'll let Megan get started with the presentation, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you.
Part of that's also a sign-in sheet that we can submit to State Revolving Loan Fund. So I'll pass that along for council and then we'll
Thank you.
pass it to the audience.
Thank you.
So we do have a presentation up on here with a slideshow, and I have some printed out copies. A little hard seeing. Not sure I have enough for everyone, but you do. So if anyone would like to print it out, we'll have it. With that, I'll go ahead and get started. So this was our preliminary engineering report for the wastewater utility. Okay, so this is how we've broken down preliminary engineering report and how it's standard for SRF requirements. I'm going to go over the project planning areas, current situation and issues currently facing the utility, and then discuss what alternatives we took a look at and what ultimately we're recommending is best for the wastewater utility. So in the project planning section, we first identified any environmental concerns, environmentally vetted areas. And we noted that there is a floodplain, majority area of the wastewater treatment plant, so that's something that needs to be considered in our design phase. And one of the larger issues facing the utility is the rapid growth that the town is facing. So we took a large examination at population growth and home developments are likely to occur in a 5-year phased approach and our full 20-year design period. So here we have a graph of population projections, our historical population of the town of New Palestine and Hancock County as well. So these are different growth projections for our 20-year design period. And as you can see, there's some steep growth anticipated. So here is the current layout of the wastewater treatment plant and current design parameters for the plant. And then we've included what our analysis found for what the actual flows and loadings are at the plant. So you can see the difference here in the design flows and the actual flows. The plant is both currently hydraulically overloaded and biologically overloaded, not operating as intended. As most of you may know, the plant recently did go under a renovation project in 2018. Unfortunately, the design of the project, combined with the rapid growth of the town, leaves it today currently under capacity. So we also took a look at the collection system and issues currently facing the collection system as well. That includes a number of overloaded and under capacity lift stations and some inflow and infiltration issues throughout the collection system as well. And with extreme wet weather events, that's going to lead to sanitary sewer overflows given these deficiencies. In addition to the primary utility the town maintains and operates, they also acquired the GEM utility. So this is on the north side of town, and this consists of the GEM wastewater treatment plant and 3 additional lift stations. So this was purchased with the intent to decommission that wastewater treatment plant and send all flows to the primary treatment plant on the south side of town. They're currently operating as separate, leaving the utility operators a little bit strained between their efforts. So I'm now going to discuss a little bit what our growth projections look like and everything we considered on how the town is likely to grow in the next 5 years, in the next 20 years. So we considered 4 different alternatives for what is most likely to occur. So after the town identified some known areas of developments that are likely to occur in the next 5 years, Commonwealth also took a look at what potential areas may develop in addition for the full 20-year build-out. So Series 1 just consists of those areas, what the town's identified in addition to what we've identified. Series 2 includes decommissioning that gem utilities I was just talking about and sending that flow to the main plant, in addition to the 3% annual growth on those flows. Series 3 includes those development areas, gem utilities, and then we also took a look at county customers in the area that are currently on septic systems, but that if the town chooses to, they could acquire those homes as customers, decommission their septic systems, and add them to the system. And then Series 4, the most aggressive growth scenario, includes the existing county flows in addition to 3% annual growth in those areas. So this map is a little bit hard to see here, but shows all those areas we're looking at. With this pink area being the current sanitary customer areas, and then these orange and yellow areas are the known and projected growth areas, and then these large blue areas are for the county customers. So after examining these growth projections, we took a look at the most aggressive growth scenarios and what the corresponding growth year would be for each of the other growth scenarios. So at a 5-year build out, for the most aggressive growth scenario, we're projecting a flow of 1.5 MGD. For the other growth scenarios, they would reach that at 2037, 2036, and 2029. So regardless of the growth, we're projecting that at some point within our 20-year design period, the utility is going to reach this 1.5 MGD flow. And this also includes our other factors. So this ultimately was our selected design parameters for our preliminary engineering report. And these are the estimated parameters for the effluent of the plant as well. And here's for that 20-year build out in case the town is experiencing this high level of growth. Then after 5 years, they would need to do a secondary build out to reach these 20-year flows. So I'm going to discuss a little bit what our alternatives we considered are. This first alternative includes 4 new aeration tanks in addition to 2 new primary filters. All of the wastewater treatment plant alternatives include a new mechanical screen, a new influent pump station, these new UV disinfection system, a cascade aeration system, and converting the digesters into sludge holding tanks, as well as a new bag dewatering system. So alternative 1, we have aeration tanks, clarifiers, and primary filters. This was the most expensive of the wastewater treatment plant alternatives at $22.6 million. This next alternative, the primary treatment, is from aeration tanks alone, and that includes the additional, or the existing aeration tanks that are currently at the plant. And this wastewater treatment plant alternative was at $20.1 million. The third wastewater treatment plant alternative we looked at was decommissioning the existing aeration tanks and clarifiers, and instead replacing the treatment system with a sequencing batch reactor. And this was the most affordable alternative at $14.8 million. For the collection system, we did an evaluation to see where that growth was likely to occur and which lift stations would be under capacity, and ranked them as high or medium priority based on how many customers they're supporting. The gem utility alternatives are to decommission the existing gem wastewater treatment plant and replace this lift station, in addition to adding a force main to direct all this flow to the primary treatment plant. So here's the cost estimate for the gem utility regionalization at $5.2 million. And this is for the county area regionalization. Mentioned earlier, they're currently on septic systems, and this would benefit the town as they're expanding their customer regionalization, we looked at adding grinder pumps for each of the residences, and then adding force main and connecting to existing lift stations. These lift stations would need to be upsized for the additional customers. So, County Area 1, County Area 2, County Area 3. So for full regionalization of all these areas, this was a total of $25.9 million. So in examining these alternatives, we have provided the following recommended project. This was alternative 3 for the wastewater treatment plants, the sequencing batch reactor. This was the most affordable project to be able to provide the treatment plant with the flow needed, treatment abilities needed. For those 5-year flows, we recommend just these 2, cell SBR, and then an additional tank for the 20-year build-out. For the recommended collection system project, we have replacement of all the undersized lift stations, as well as decommissioning the gem utility and directing that flow to the main plant, so adding this force main in. And we looked at scenarios of including those county customers as well as not including those county customers, because this could go either way. So this is the recommended projects, including that regionalization and where those areas are. So this is a table of our recommended project schedule without county regionalization. So we're here right now, public hearing. This shows completion of final design in June 2023 and completion of construction and full project in August of 2025. With county regionalization, we show completion of final design in August 2023 and completion of construction, the entire project, including that regionalization, in April of 2026. So this is the total recommended project cost without that county regionalization at $22.6 million. And inclusive of county regionalization, it is at $46.1 million. So that's the complete presentation for the PER. Jared is also here to discuss what that would mean financially.
Okay. And just to provide some clarifications, the reason we looked at a 5-year projection is because you have such rapid growth. We don't want to overbuild and have the existing customer base have to bear the costs. What we want to do is we want to pare this project out into 2 phases so that we can have the most affordable improvements project, make sure it's supported by the additional customers that are coming in. And we went with the most aggressive approach so that we could accommodate that within 5 years. But even if you don't see that aggressive growth, you'll see the growth within the planning period. The typical planning period is 20 years. So most aggressive growth within 5 years, you're going to have to engage in a phase 2 project. But what we want to do is we want to bring as many customers on board as possible so that we can mitigate the rate increase. So it's a little unique in a rapidly growing community. We worked in Fishers, Indiana. Back when we did Fishers plant, it seemed like we were designing a new plant as we were constructing the previous one because they just grew so quickly. We looked at the county scenarios because of the Build Back Better plan that came out of the federal government. With that plan, there's incentive for regionalization. Now, obviously, we as a community do not want to pay to pick up county customers, but we want an opportunity to go to the funding agency and indicate that through our project we can accommodate this, and they would become customers to us only for treatment. So we would look to get $20, $30 in that range per customer to augment the cost of our project. And because they have funds to promote regionalization, it could be a win-win scenario. So what we want to do is we want to put the town in a position to keep the rate increase to a minimum. So we're looking at the 5-year growth. We're looking at potentially incorporating county customers as contractual customers, all to keep the cost down. And with that cost approach, Jared can talk about some of the scenarios and alternatives and how that will impact you.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan.
Good evening, Jared Hall, Cronin Associates, the financial advisor for the town of New Palestine. As you heard from Megan, obviously the engineers were engaged to look at your wastewater treatment, both your plant and your collection system, to do a thorough analysis to determine needs and future growth. And so the presentation they just provided, you provided the scope of the project and then the potential associated cost with such project. And so what they've asked me to do is to come in and kind of do some modeling to see what that would have as an impact on the ratepayers. So this is actually kind of mimics Megan's timetable, but we're here in July. So one thing that we need to do, and I think part of the objective tonight is obviously to approve the PER, but then also talk about how to go forward. And what I think you guys will be talking about in a little bit is the next step for the engineers would be to start looking in more depth. The PER does a really high level analysis. As they dive into the design phase of the project, they can actually kind of firm up numbers, costs, and determine exactly the components needed to accomplish the capacity. And so what we'd be talking about is the financing for that. And then in February 23, the PER approval, and then we would look to, as far as I'm concerned, from the finance side, we would look at the end of next year to possibly close on the permanent financing for the project. That's the tentative timetable that has been established. So the project, as Megan mentioned, it really breaks down into two. You have the water system improvement without the county regionalization, and that comes out to that $22.6 million. With the county regionalization, it's $46,000, and as Al mentioned, there's a very strong initiative at the state level to encourage regionalization, and so they're always looking. The IFA, Indiana Finance Authority, which is a state agency that the SRF is underneath, it's kind of a red flag in their eyes when they see a good red flag when they see regionalization in the project scope, and they're always encouraged to induce people to move forward with those projects. And so, as Al mentioned, I think we definitely want to keep it in as an option. Obviously, it comes at a price tag, but as we move further down in this process into next year, we'll be able to talk with IFA and SRF and work with them to possibly obtain grant funding to help subsidize some of those additional costs. The modeling that I've run today is really on this assumption up here, which addresses the needs of your current customers, your current territory. And I guess if anybody has any questions, please interrupt.
Yeah, I have a question talking about this, the regionalization money, and you're talking about grants. You have any idea like how much that would be, what percentage, 5 million, 10 million, 1 million? I mean, how can we know how to make a budget if we don't know how much we're gonna get possibly?
We wouldn't proceed unless we received reassurance from the SRF that there was $0 impact to the community for this.
Wow.
What our approach is going to be is we are gonna perform our improvements project. SRF, if you want us to pick up these county customers, we'd be happy to do so, and we would provide contractual treatment so that it would be a win scenario for New Palestine. But we are not going to do it at even $1 cost to the town.
Okay, that's good.
You would have to make sure that you provide the funding for this regionalization project, and we will then service contractual treatment.
So it would be foolish for us not to do if they're gonna pay for,
We would want to leave it in under that scenario, because with that infrastructure bill, for the next 5 years, the state revolving loan fund has seen 5 times the amount of funding that they've seen in previous years.
Okay.
That amount, 49% of that is grant funds. And those grant funds will be allocated to areas that meet their definition of distress, which this potentially could. This would be a discussion that we would hold with the county for their ARP funds. It would also be a discussion we would hold with the state revolving loan fund, but we would not engage in $1 worth of effort until we received assurances. Otherwise, it's just a project that Jared's identifying. So basically, I would look at this as we're pursuing the top project, and the only way we pursue the bottom one is if there's a financial benefit to the town.
I mean, and do you think, is there a good chance they would do the bottom one, or is that
It's a lot,
50/50
it's
or?
a lot of money, so but we also have time on our hands. So this first round of SRF, they've already published the project priority list. There's a lot of projects there. But over 5 years, they have to get rid of this money. And not every state's gonna get rid of their money. So, you know, there will be money available. So I think we leave it in as an inducement. And then if we can benefit, we proceed, and if not, we don't.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Good
thanks,
question,
Al.
Chris.
Basically, we'll go in and we'll say what, how much, the way it works from my end, SRF will have our firm, or, we'll provide schedules, documents to them to say, hey, look, we need $15 million, $20 million, whatever that number is, in order to fully fund the project without having to increase the user rates a single penny, as
Okay.
Al mentioned.
So Jared, and maybe this is where you're going next, what does that top project relate to in cost to current ratepayers?
Yeah,
And
I'm headed right there.
Okay, thanks. And that's what everyone wants to know.
I know, I'm holding you all in suspense. So, the caveat, right, is we only know what we know today. And right, growth, and as everybody knows, I sat through the planning commission meeting, there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of potential growth. The real trick of this is that we can't sell bonds based on what you think you're gonna develop. And there's been other communities, we've seen this happen, where, growth is there, everything's approved, and 2008 happens.
Yeah.
So, the industry won't let us go out and say, well, we're positive so-and-so's gonna develop that neighborhood for 100 homes. Well, that's great, but we can get right up to the day, pretty much up to the day with the number of connections on the system, and we can get credit for all that. But it's just something, this is where this is really dynamic, because it's the cart before the horse, I think I talked to somebody in the Field of Dreams, if they build it, they will come, but you gotta get the money to build it. So, there's my caveat. So here's where we start. We start right here. 2021 is our test year, so that's what we just use as our baseline. Our test year in 2021 is 1,660 EDUs, and as I was talking to Yvonne earlier today, she said, what is an EDU? So an EDU is it's kind of bringing everything apples to apples. It's like an equivalent residential home. So some businesses have larger flows, have larger capacity, but what it does is it translates that into kind of this industry standard level playing field. So it's not 1,600 houses, it might be 1,500 houses and 50 businesses that, but it's probably more of an engineering technical term, but that's how we kind of create a level playing field. So 2021, that's our test year. Right now, the most, I'd say worst case scenario, no growth. We're stuck at those numbers, which I can tell you that's not true because we already have more EDUs. I had a check with the billing folks, and in June you were up to 1,844, so obviously we've had growth, but no growth. Here's our project. Based on the 5-year growth, it's I believe 2,165 EDUs, which comes out to about 433 a year over 5 years. So we're sitting, this is 21, we're talking about getting financing at the end of 23, so that's 2 years. So that's where we come up with this 866 at the end of 23. That's not to say that's all we're getting, but So, each one of those pays these connection fees to generate this much money. So we've got the total project cost, 22 million. We use those connection fees, because that's what they're for, to buy down the borrowing amount, okay? So, with that,
One
any
question.
question? Yes.
Did you factor in our new connection fee or just our old connection fee?
I've got these two.
It's higher than that.
Is it higher? Okay. What are those?
It's $37.50.
Clint, I know you love
The
projections.
acreage amount, actually, I don't know off the top of my head. 1925, so that is correct. 1975.
Okay.
So he's, 1975 is correct, but your connection fee is
So
off by
it will,
be-
it will help us here on the
Right.
next
Yeah,
page.
it'd be
but
another $866,000,
That's
right?
right. So I appreciate that. I'll update my numbers, but,
Thanks, Mike.
so it will help us on the next page. So we take, let's stick with this
Okay.
for now. We would be borrowing under these scenarios, these amounts of money, okay?
Yeah.
So here's where we get all of the schedules, the numbers. So here's our test year, here's 2021. You can see at the top, there's our, the 832,000 is just your operations. You currently have a 2017 SRF bond outstanding with the annual debt service of 223,000. The necessary bond coverage is 25%, the minimum, so it's 55,000. We had test year revenues of 1.3 million. Stormwater, 83,000, penalties, interest, to come up with total receipts of 1.4 million here. We actually had an excess, which is used for working capital, pay-go. I mean, it's not unique by any means, but this is kind of where we are now. No growth. We effectively keep the same receipts, but now we put in a $22 million bond right here, and there's, the debt service, 25%. So we have a $1.6 million shortfall. So 67 becomes 149. Yeah, so it's a lot. But this assumes nothing, which, okay, so we go over here to this column. Everything's the same. We borrow 18 million, and actually this number is going to be a little bit less, because this is the debt service on 18 million. Shortfall is 566,000, or $95. This assumes no grants. This assumes growth at this level. And I have, so kind of that will, so these are things like considerations that will have an impact on those, okay? So obviously if we have more or less growth, that rate changes depending on that, okay? Grant funds, when we apply for grant funds, I can tell you right now, $65 is the metric that SRF uses. That doesn't guarantee you money, and I can't sit up here and tell you how much, or I can't guarantee anything. I have no say in it. I have a lot of communities that get it and will lobby for it and will, apply for all of them. $65 is currently their threshold to qualify. So they'll look at it and they'll say, oh, okay, your rates are over $65, and they'll determine what they think, grants. Yeah. So you guys already meet it. It's probably going to go up. It's been at $65 for a lot of years. As we know, inflation's a real thing going on right now. I expect it to go up to probably $70 or $75. But either way, given the numbers that we just saw, this project would qualify for the grants. The other thing is project size, and that's I kind of talked about at the beginning, and not to put words in your guys' mouth, but the PDR is an estimate, and as they design and get more involved, you're able to kind of fine-tune those costs. They could go up, they could go down, but to me, it's a variable in this project that could impact the rates.
Absolutely. The PER is the worst case scenario. And what you're hearing tonight from Jared too is also a very conservative scenario. I mean, nobody in their right mind is going to approve proceeding with a project that's going to result in rates of
connection fee right here?
Yes.
Yeah.
So just to kind of break this down some more, right now, our treatment plant's overloaded. So we need to perform a project, period. So the choice is, do we perform a project to address what's going on right now and shut the town down and not accept any more growth? Or do we proceed with growth and perform a project that's going to accommodate the growth? So we're proposing a 1.5 MGD plant. You need 0.47 now. So basically, we're threefold increasing the capacity. He's identified for projected growth 866 EDUs. That's the growth in 2 years. We were told these lots are going to develop in 5 years in working with the town. So you take that 866 and you increase it to what? You're Mr. Wizard with the numbers.
Well, I tell you, at 2,100 at a full 5-year build out, the $67 supports it.
Right.
But
So basically, your connection fees support the project at the end of the 5-year planning period. SRF is going to provide, they don't call it grant, they call it loan forgiveness. But their objective is to provide loan forgiveness to keep your rates at $65. You basically were adversely impacted by pursuing the last project that you just borrowed from. So SRF understands this. And if you approve us proceeding, that would be the next step for us to have the conversation with them and then identify the financial package that they would be willing to provide us with. And we want to basically proceed with this and say, look, here's our situation. We borrowed funds and we increased our rates $20. And now we're in a situation to where we have to do it again, and our ratepayers can't pay that much money. We're about at our limit right now. But, so we want to talk to you, given this point in time, that we have all these funds, on how we can proceed and now how we can minimize the risk to our ratepayers. So either you proceed with the project so that you aren't in violation, or you proceed with the project at the 5-year projected growth rate, and you work out the finances with state revolving loan fund to keep your rate increase to a minimum.
Well, when they look at those rate increases, do they take into account the percentage of growth you've had over the last few years or that year? Or?
They can't take into account the growth. They have to look at this based upon the EDUs that you have at the time. And that's the tricky situation for communities that are facing rapid growth. Because right now, today, the only thing we can guarantee you is what the rate would be if you proceeded with this project at the number of EDUs you have today. But what we can tell you is if we started today, we're not going to be able to bid and award the project for 2 years. So you'll have those 2 years of additional EDUs. Then on top of that, you have the ability to accept flows up to the 1.5. And if you receive flows up to that point, then, it's no impact. But, you never get anything for free and you can't guarantee anything. The only thing you guarantee is you're going to drop dead someday.
I have a question that,
We try to minimize risk.
with that 1.5, was that in the 5-year plan or the 20-year plan?
It's the 5-year plan. That's the most aggressive growth over 5 years. So if we don't see that type of growth, then we have more time before we commence with phase 2. But
Okay,
if
so like that could you might not even need phase 2 if, let's say, no growth started happening, which probably isn't going to be the case. But I'm just saying you could just stop there instead of
Correct.
having
Now,
more money to spend.
You're at 1660 EDUs now.
Yeah.
So multiply that by 3. Okay, so basically you're going to be at 4,500, 4,800 EDUs before you need another project. Jared's assuming 866 EDUs to be your additional, not 3,000. So I mean, you basically have the capacity to bring customers on board to mitigate the rate increase, or you can nullify the rate increase. But it is the field of dream scenario. It's not, you can't build it without knowing what's going on. Now the approach would be, is you proceed with the design, and then if something happens over the next 2 years, you pare it back.
Okay. And the flip side is, if the growth exceeds even expectations, it means more connections, but it also means a bigger need.
It means as we construct the first phase, we're designing the second phase, just like we've done in other communities. So, this is the best approach that we can come up with, given your situation. And we're trying to provide you with all the caveats, all the outs with respect to potentially accepting county flows, with talking with state revolving loan fund based upon what occurred with your previous rate increase, where you are now, and financial capabilities to afford, and talking with the county, because the county has these funds as well, to see if we can get some consideration. So these numbers are scary. Nobody's going to move forward, but there are off ramps along the way. And the first approach is we submit it, we have the conversation.
That's how this process works. This is the process. You have to go, you have to submit. It's kind of like buying a car. None of us want to sit there and go back and forth with the sales manager, right? Like, let's just get to it. With SRF, we have to submit the PO. We'll have the discussions. We're gonna talk to them, and we're gonna show them and say, hey, look what this does. And they're gonna go, oh, we can't. We've got money. They've got resources. They want to use those resources. So I am up here today to show you, like Al said, this is kind of the worst case scenario. But if it gets to this, there will be.
We're getting off the ramp.
Yes.
That.
Okay.
But this is the real numbers, the accounting of it. So, did you have a?
Yeah, I have a question on that. If you don't do projections into the future, how can you project what the county growth number would be and all that stuff?
I believe the county's already built out, like those are already existing homes. Is
Oh,
that
you're
just-
talking about the ones that are already here?
Right, in those areas, we did a lockdown. So
Okay.
basically, on day one, when you turn this thing on, those would be, we know the customers that you will get. And we looked at it and said, okay, let's say the county doesn't grow at all over 20 years, and we just pick up those homes. So that's one of the scenarios. And then the other scenario is, typically when you have sewers, areas become more desirable to develop.
Right,
So-
yeah,
so we-
right.
So we looked at a 3% growth in the county as well, once the sewers were installed, as another potential. So that's the 20-year, the 5-year projection is based off the most aggressive,
Right.
and we buy more time if it doesn't grow at that rate.
So basically, if you were able to get grants or financing or whatever for the county type growth, the 5 years might extend out even farther, right?
If we were to get the financing for the counties,
Yeah.
we may have to build sooner, because it may grow quicker.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
But that would be
We'd make a lot more money in then.
into the finance, their funding.
Okay.
because
I
that's-
was gonna say, it'd be great, because we
But
bring
you'd
a lot
have
of
the
money.
money, right? I mean,
We wouldn't do it unless the SRF paid for everything for the county. So
Okay.
what we would do is we'd say, we have 1.5 MGD at this plant. If you want to help us to where basically you're putting the sewers in, we will provide treatment, and you will pay us this amount of money. What's the going rate, $20 or $30? So basically that knocks down what the town needs to pay. And there are scenarios to where you can have in-town and out-of-town rates. Typically, I see 125% between what we charge somebody out-of-town versus in-town, but you have to do a study, I believe, to
Yeah.
support what that is. But all we can do is we can provide you with flexibility right now. We can identify what your issues are, what your options are. The options, you have one option to do nothing and have IDEM come and say, okay, now you have to do something. So that is an option, but
Not
it's
the
not
good
the best
one.
option for us, because we want to be in control of this. And at some point, the regulatory agency is going to say you have to do something, so you want to do it on your terms. And you want to have time to pursue these financing avenues. And you're really in a good position compared to many communities, because it's not like you're stagnant and you have to do something and you have no potential for increased revenues. But if you do proceed down this path, what it means is that you are going to be more motivated to approve developments. Because if you don't approve the developments, then you don't get the customers.
I guess what I was saying is, you know, your 5 year calls for 1.5 the volume. And if you do the county, what volume do you think that would be over the 5 years?
The county number is included in that 5.
Oh, in the 1.5?
In the 1.5.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So you can see that that's the most aggressive. You can see the other time frames that extend like 6 years, 8 years, 10 years. One of those is without the county.
Okay.
So the 5 year includes the county and then the known 5 year development. Good?
Yeah.
All right.
And again, we're one step at a time. We're not asking you today to approve rates that are gonna be $150. We're asking you to approve a designated signatory so we can move forward with the next step. Submit to state revolving loan fund, set a meeting with them, set a meeting with the county, have these discussions, and also proceed with limited engineering. The limited engineering is we need to put flow meters in because we're doing projections on flows to determine where we're gonna improve your lift stations. We need to meter the flows because what's happening is when it rains, everything's coming to that lift station. And the lift station is pumping as much as it can, and then it's going to the next. We don't know how much it's backing up. I think it's backing up a lot because you are starting to see some overflows. That's gonna impact how we size your lift station. And that's gonna impact heating factors on the plant. So that's the first step is to get a working model of your sewer system so that we can then define these design parameters. They're conservative design parameters now. Once we have a working model, then we can hone in on that. We can see if we can make it more affordable. These numbers also reflect the current bid environment. So you probably heard, maybe saw in the paper, the project in Greenfield, Indiana. So they had a project, and based upon current bid environment, it came in about 40% higher than what would be projected. The current bid environment is reflecting increased costs in steel because of the conflict in Ukraine. They're the primary supplier of nickel. And that caused an increase of 100% 3 weeks time on pipe. Hopefully in 2 years' time, there's gonna be some type of resolution to the supply chain issues that we're seeing, the labor issues we're seeing, the steel issues that we're seeing. We can't guarantee it, but what's going on now is unprecedented with respect to impacts and costs. And it probably will get worse before it gets better. I can't imagine it's gonna last 2 years, but
So Al, let me make sure that I understand. We need to approve the preliminary engineering report. We need to approve a designated signatory. What else do we need to approve?
to approve the designated, to approve the planning report as presented, to identify the council president as the designated signatory for all the paperwork for submission to state revolving loan fund for consideration for financing. And then at that point in time, once we do that, then we can discuss about a limited notice to proceed for the engineer so that we can put the meters in and we can get the flows so we can move forward with the model.
Do you need that this evening?
Not this evening, we can do that after we go through the submittal process. But the reason I'd like to do that is we want to get the flows when it rains. And it hasn't rained for a long time, I know, but typically come August, September, we see rain. If not, we're gonna be waiting till April or May. So I'd like to get that moving forward so we can get the meters in before we get to our last stint of the time it's gonna rain. Otherwise, it's gonna delay your project 6 months, 8 months, because we'll have to wait.
And that's the limited,
A limited notice to proceed for, let's just call it preliminary engineering, inclusive of flow metering and bond. All of these things would be applicable to a smaller project as well. So we're not committed to a huge financial burden. We're committed to what would need to be done regardless.
Thank you.
Is that stimulus money available for that type of project?
Ours is already designated. for
Okay.
that, And it's not part of their financial picture, that's what we have. It's $500,000, it's kind of more or less a drop on a hot plate for this large of a project.
But we can't use it for this project?
It is already
Oh,
designated
okay.
for that, yeah.
Okay.
But there is, obviously, you said, possibilities of getting other grants, we just won't know that for a
Oh, yeah.
while?
Yeah, we wouldn't be, I don't think we would be having a discussion of a project this size.
Okay, just wanted to
without
make
that,
sure.
But that's,
No problem.
I can't speak to, I mean, other than you qualified, in my experience, more than qualified for
Okay.
that, but we just have to go through the process. So, I think, yeah, and Al just kind of summarized the last slide here, that, he's looking for a couple of those approvals.
Okay.
Obviously, there's no motions, no rate changes here, and that just keeping that regionalization project on the radar, but,
Okay.
for them to keep pursuing it. Other than that, that's what I have.
Thank you. Well, why don't we get a motion on the table, because once we have a motion that is seconded, then it's open
All
for
right.
discussion. So would anybody like to take a stab at making a motion?
You're writing a lot of stuff down, go ahead and make the motion.
Okay, I'll make the,
Yeah.
I did write the stuff
I
down.
know.
It's in my nature. Number one, I move that we approve the preliminary engineering report as presented, or the planning report as presented. I also, in the same motion, request authority to designate the council president as the designated signatory to sign whatever documents are needed to move forward with the submittals that were discussed. I don't think we have to go this evening with the limited notice to proceed, because we can do that soon. Al, did I miss anything?
I think that would be a good first step.
That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, Al. Make sure that we've got the right motion. So it has now been moved and seconded, so it's open for discussion.
I seconded that.
Thank you.
So, my thoughts are, we've hired engineers, we've hired experts to come in, make recommendations. In my opinion, it's kind of a waste of money if you don't follow them, or at least some of them. And I think we're going down the right trail, at least exploring the possibilities. Obviously, we like the notion of getting state funding, grants, whatever's out there, and recognize there's no guarantee, but we're also at a point where we can't do nothing. That's not an option, because as Al said, if that's the option you pursue, I guess it is an option, but if you pursue that option, it's just a matter of time before we get some really ugly notices from state agencies that we don't want to get ugly notices from. So, that's,
I agree with that, we have to do something, and I like this idea where he's talking about these, get-offs. If things aren't going the way we think, or we're not getting the grants, or we're not getting the funding, we can
put the
take
brakes
it,
on.
put the brakes on and not go with it, so I definitely like that.
Okay. Clint, any thoughts? I know you love projections.
Yeah, well, I don't like projections, because all projections are wrong. But, yeah, I agree, we need to do something here.
Okay. Brandy?
I agree, we need to move ahead. Like you said, it's not good for IDEM to get involved and then create an emergency, so,
Angie?
yeah.
I'm good. I've met with Al, I think it was a couple weeks ago, and
Mhm.
started to do this. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, any other comments or discussion regarding the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, and, we'll move forward, and, we'll do what we need to do.
Thank you, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda.
Sign that paper, can we ask some questions?
Yeah, in just a couple seconds, will be the public comments.
I meant about this, I mean,
Yeah,
we signed the paper, we're attending a public meeting,
right. And
so we can't ask any questions.
sure we can.
I mean, we have all this stuff up there. Anybody have any questions, other questions?
You know what? Let's open up for questions while they're fresh.
Thank you. One question I had is the connection fee, and it looks like it says connection fee for EDU, and when we raise the connection fee, I've never heard the term EDU, so now EDU is like 15 homes.
No, EDU is equivalent dwelling unit, one house.
Right.
And the best I can say is, let's say, help me out. What's a very intensive use?
Daycare.
A daycare, car wash, I mean, I don't know what's so let's say it's a daycare. There's somewhere a chart that would say a daycare counts as 3.5 EDUs, meaning they're gonna use 3.5 times what a normal residence would use per day. So the EDU, as I understand it, it's a concept to try to level the playing field. So if you're really a high user, whatever it is, I don't know, you use 8 EDUs. Well, your rate is gonna be 8 times what a household rate that's 1 EDU. So Al, am I even close?
Absolutely. The EDU from an engineering standpoint is 4,000 gallons per day. And that's the typical household is what they identify that to be.
4,000 gallons a
I'm
day?
sorry, 310 gallon per day per house.
Okay, I was gonna say, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna hit the kids.
I need lower showers.
That's a lot of water.
Darn kids.
Yeah, that's, is.
Okay, so that helps me. So do we look at that as a town, if you come to us and say you want to hook up, do we say, okay, you have a 2-bedroom house, or a 3-bedroom house with 2 toilets, so you're this fee? and another guy
Our
has-
residential rate's the same for everybody.
Yeah, residential would be the
Doesn't
same,
matter whether they have 5 toilets or 2 toilets,
correct.
Or no toilets.
or no toilets.
That's exactly right.
Indiana Administrative Code has a chart, and that shows you how to calculate EDUs for non-residential customers.
Right.
So my other question is, if you go to the county and you're trying to get those septic customers, what burden does that put on those people to connect?
Well, they did just pass a law on that, so if you do have a functioning septic system, and you don't have to connect. I think what they're looking to do is they're looking to phase out septics over the next 15 to 20 years. So eventually they have to.
And people are kind of on notice that that's coming.
Right, and the septic, I mean, if your septic system is failing, or, there's detriments associated with septic, so some of those folks will wanna connect, some of them won't. That's what, if we can put the infrastructure in now, and if we can work out the appropriate deal to where we assume the infrastructure in the right of way, but we don't assume the grinder pumps for the customers, they assume the grinder pumps, then we also have a situation that anytime there's a connection, we get a connection fee. So what we wanna do is we wanna get the state to pay for the infrastructure. We wanna get the customers at a contractual rate for treatment, and then we want to assume the infrastructure in the right of way only, so that we can then collect connection fees on it over the next 20 years.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, and it's,
You're making me give out all my secrets in a public meeting.
well, but we need the information, because we certainly don't know,
Hopefully SRF is not listening.
well, and that's, again, that's why we hire folks that know the things that we don't, and we appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about the numbers. So the number you threw out, or the mayor presented, was 22 million, I believe, for, there was a 22 million number and then a 14 million.
That's right. The 22 million is for the project that does not include the county consideration, so it's not the county infrastructure. That would
residences that are outside the town limits, and have septic. Is that a fair statement?
In three areas that are adjacent to the town.
And it's because they currently have septic.
Because they currently have septic, and in our conversation with the county sanitarian, they have documented health issues associated with the septic. So that's what motivates the state. If we had an area with septic systems and there were no documented issues, then they would still want to replace them because we know it's just a matter of time. But you have issues to where there's E. coli in standing water.
Yeah, so one of the questions I have is, what is, and I do cost projections myself, I'm a chemical engineer, I do that myself for, in my job. So typically we have, when we throw numbers like that, we have a plus or minus 20% or plus or minus 50%, or what is the uncertainty associated with that number?
The uncertainty is we get no customers at all from the county, so it's 100%.
I was gonna say the uncertainty is 100%.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
So what we're assuming
You
is,
look down
But
from,
if we don't
we have the
afford
different
it,
growth scenarios. One of them is we don't
Fix it
accept
up,
county customers.
push it, but-
And that makes our plant good for more than 5 years. It's for like 8 years or 10 years. What we typically do is a planning project, you typically plan for a 20-year planning period because that's the duration of your bond.
Well, yeah, okay, so the 22 million is, it's a certain number of reactors, blah, 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 right?
For treatment, yes.
Right. So what is the uncertainty associated with that number? In other words, I know you talk about inflation, and I know you can't, no one can predict that. But is it, so it's possible this number could be more than 22 million?
Right now, well, it's always possible it could be more, but from a planning standpoint, we take a conservative approach. What I'm asking to do is I'm asking to proceed with the modeling, so we can hone that number down. Right now, I've used conservative assumptions to decide. Because when you go in and you ask for financing, you don't want to go back and ask for more. You always want it to be less, and you don't want to work with communities and sell them a project and say it's going to be 22 million, and then end up being 44 million, because then you're not in business that much longer.
or what we would appreciate is if you don't say, this is a 5-year project, but in 8 months, you're gonna need a new one.
Well,
I mean, not that that's a possibility.
Yeah, they were.
there are some firms that do that.
It's been known. Okay. Any other public comment?
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
I have a question. If
Sure.
Commonwealth has unforeseen construction costs that raises it, how's that gonna be funded?
If we solicit at 22 million, and at time of bidding, then the bid's coming higher, how is that going to be funded? What we would do is we would do just like we did in Greenfield. We would go back to the state revolving loan fund. We would identify, through the process, you do preliminary, and then you update your cost estimate. You say, here's what it was in planning. We've done preliminary design. Here's where we are now. And then we talk with you when we say if there's an increase, we talk about options to get it back within budget. If it's less, everybody's happy. Then we go to final design, and then we update cost set. We say, okay, here's where we are now. We're within budget, let's go out to bid. If you go out to bid, and something happens with bid environment, like pipe cost increase 100% in 3 weeks, or whatever, that's not usual. But if something like that were to happen, then you would go back to state revolving loan fund, and you'd say, look, we were adversely impacted here. What we need to do is we need to obtain some more funding for it. And that's what we did in Greenfield, that's what we're doing, and they go through different processes to where you can maybe go with pooled funding, where there's other scenarios to where you can accommodate that. I don't want that to happen, so
But if it does, at least there are options.
there are always options, but you're not going to be surprised along the way. We're going to keep you informed along the way, and you're going to be a part of the decisions along the way.
Angie, did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Thank you, Al. Appreciate it. Let's move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is the bond council engagement letter. I know Chris
Did we
had.
vote on that?
We didn't. Oh, did we vote on, yeah, we voted on the
Yeah.
prior motion.
Yeah.
I wrote down 5-0.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you know what, just to be sure, it's better to vote twice than not at all.
We already voted on that.
Just in case we
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
vote on that
Do you have
last.
any
voted on
bond
it.
documented?
You voted.
Well, you know what, we're gonna vote again. It was such a good motion. We had- No, no, everybody has the opportunity. There's options, Angie.
If Yvonne has documentation
Say
of
we
a
don't do
vote.
it.
Okay, we won't do it twice. It was fun the first time.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item, and now this one we didn't vote on.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I thought that was the question you were asking.
Oh, okay. Did we?
So we have the bond council engagement letter. It was on the agenda at the last meeting, and Chris had a couple really good questions, and we didn't have anybody to answer those really good questions, and we do this evening. And if I can, I'm gonna jump in on one of the questions because I had a conversation regarding that question just this afternoon
Let's hear it.
with bond counsel, Mr. Bosma, because the question was, if we sign this engagement letter, does that mean that the town has to write the check? Because the engagement letter says it's a flat fee of $75,000. Who pays the $75,000? And Ted, you tell me if I'm wrong, but what I was told was the town does not write a check. The town doesn't pay a penny because that's gonna be put into the bond financing project and the developer pays the fees. So that's as I understood it, through the bond financing.
Yeah, it's a cost of bond financing.
It's a-
Cost of issuance.
Okay, and so we do not pay it, but that, and Chris,
I'm happy with that.
any other question? Because that's the one that really I remember strongly, and so I wanted to get an answer.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Any others? Questions?
Yeah, I don't, or did we address the terminate our engagement as bond council matter?
Help me out with that one.
You may terminate our engagement as bond counsel in this matter at any time simply by notifying us. So does that mean that, what does that mean?
That means if for whatever reason the council by a majority vote decided, you know, we just don't like this. We don't like the advice we're getting, we're gonna terminate this and we're gonna hire somebody else.
Well then,
Or
how
if
do
we
we know,
stop the
wait a minute,
project
how do we know
completely.
how much we paid them, or we're paying them, and how much we'd have to pay somebody else?
Ted, I mean, as I read this, it's a fixed cost. I mean, that's as I read it, but,
Right. I mean, if you wanna change horses in the middle, you know, they would have to start all over themselves likely. I mean, I don't know how to answer that.
I know.
We've never been terminated in the middle of a bond deal, so, generally the way it works
Well, here,
is.
what worries me is it's in here. The
Well, it's-
termination thing
It's
is
in there
in
because as
here.
an attorney.
If it wasn't in there, I wouldn't have to ask the
As
question.
an attorney, we can't ever like obligate you to use this counsel. It's
Yeah.
your choice who uses counsel. So the termination procedures are always listed. You always have a right to fire your attorney whenever you want. Bill knows this.
it's terrible. But true.
So I mean, would it be like prorated or what?
We'll cross that bridge if we get to
Okay.
it.
Let me see if I can help you out. So, we didn't approve the $5 million tip. We said we would go through with it and keep going to meet and discuss this further. If we opt to not do it, they said if it was not 5 million, they were gonna walk. So if they walk in the middle of it, is it the flat?
I mean, we've eaten it in the past. It would be one of those things where we would come to you and be like, listen, we did a lot of work, you know, can we negotiate something? But to the extent that the deal didn't go through, I mean, we're always paid out of bond proceeds, bond counsel is. It's very rare that deals don't
The Hammer takes cases all the times and
Yeah.
doesn't get paid.
Commercial.
A third of zero is
You
zero.
know, unfortunately, you can't wait until the very end to engage bond counsel because all these documents have to be prepared in advance, you know, for consideration by the RDC, by the planning commission, by the council. So all the work that goes into creating the allocation areas, all the resolutions, the economic development plan, all that stuff are things that have to be done prior to knowing whether you're moving forward.
Well, but didn't we have to know what was supposed to happen tonight at the RDC meeting before we would jump into this?
That was the original plan.
We don't need to know that? We don't need to know if anybody's even gonna buy that?
Generally, you engage bond counsel before you start the process. In this case,
We're pretty far,
we're pretty far, pretty far downstream.
any other questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
All right, somebody has to be the troublemaker. I'll make a motion that we approve the bond council engagement letter as presented.
I'll second that.
Now it's back open for discussion. If there are any other questions or comments?
Well, my comment is, without knowing any of the particulars of what the bond would be, why would we approve bond counsel right now?
Well, and as Ted just said, typically this letter is signed, approved long before now, and we know it's a $5 million bond project. That isn't changed. From day one, that's been what's presented. I don't think there's anybody that has any interest in changing that. So, I mean, to that extent, we know what the request is. Because of the work that's already happened and the timelines and the tables and the steps and the procedures, we kind of understand what's necessary. Just in my opinion, I think we have enough information to make a decision on that engagement letter. But that's just my opinion.
I guess my question is, we haven't set any limit on the amount of this bond, and this didn't come up at our previous RDC meeting because we didn't have it. But just calculating, over a 10-year period with a 20% increase this year from Buzz's projection, because our tax rate went up 20% this year, and a 3% increase for the next 9 years after that, that would already give them that 75% at $6.6 million. And they're trying to collect this over the life of the TIF, which is another, is about 22 years left on it, and it could be 20 or $25 million with the increase in tax rate. So I really don't even want to discuss this unless this passes through all the rigmarole and without setting some kind of cap on this bond.
Okay. Any other?
Yeah, I thought we were talking about a $5 million bond here. You're just talking about a $20 million. I'm not understanding.
We didn't agree to the 5. It's still in discussion.
The request has been made at 5.
That's what I thought.
That's correct.
That's what I thought we were talking about the whole
And
time.
I get all the rigmarole. The problem is, someone's got to produce the rigmarole, and that's what bond counsel does. When you have all of the documents to consider at the RDC meeting, the planning commission meeting, you want bond counsel to show up and explain financing and the process of the TIF bonds and the allocation area. I mean, no one just works for free or shows up. So, like, you want the engagement generally in advance of all the rigmarole because that's part of it. You know, we take a risk too because if it doesn't get approved, then, we're out.
Well, yeah, but the only thing I say about the amount is this is the principal amount of $5 million. So that doesn't include, what the increase in, what they said was they were gonna collect 75% of the collected taxes on the property.
On the improvements.
Yes.
And the rest stays with the town through the RDC.
So even at Buzz's projections, the principal might have been 5 million, but if you multiply that out, by his projection was $8 million.
No, that includes the interest.
That's exactly right. So,
So the $5 million includes the interest.
so in my opinion, we need to set, if we decide on 8 million or 5 million or whatever we decide on, there needs to be a cap on how much they collect, instead of collecting 75% of the taxes for 22 years that could come out to $25 million.
Ted, could they
No,
realize a
no.
windfall?
It can't come out to $25 million?
Let Jared explain it.
Well,
Help us out.
I've not officially been involved, but what I do know is that, there would be an outstanding note, $5 million with an interest rate. Did somebody say 3% maybe? Is that what, one of the, let's say it's 3%, there's interest. It's just like any other note bond.
Right.
They're going to collect 75% of the increment that they pay until that note's paid off.
That's not what they said. They said till the
Is that-
TIF runs out.
He's correct. So what happened, we're not paying any more than the bond amount plus the interest. All right, so the developer will buy the bond, likely. The 75% gets put into a debt service fund. That fund is used to pay the bond. Not any more than the 5% face value of the bond plus the interest, or whatever the term of the bond is. They don't get the extra. Now, this only is the 75% is just dedicated to repayment of the bond.
Okay, that makes more sense.
The projections, which I know how much you like, the projections are what we know today, but it could go out 20 years. If the increment doesn't come in, or it's a lot less than is estimated today, they have up to 20 years to get paid back on their bonds. If increment is substantially more than projected, it could be 5 years, 10 years.
That's not what it was presented, that's not the way it was presented.
That's typically, without being in the weeds on this specific deal, from what I'm hearing and what I've seen in other deals, that's how these economic development
That's
plans
correct.
are structured.
The 75% is just pledged towards the bond repayment. It's not pledged to the developer by any means.
Okay.
It's not theirs.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Clint, did that help?
Well, so what you're telling me is that they take out a $5 million bond and we pay 75% of whatever tax is collected on it until that $5 million bond's paid off?
That's correct.
That's correct. And the increment, not what's collected, just what is collected above today.
For the improvements,
Yeah.
the assessed value on the improvements. Okay.
Okay, well, I got a question, even though this wasn't discussed at the RDC meeting. I'm looking at, since we're talking about it, resolution number 072022A and number 10. I'd like somebody to tell me what number 10 means on that.
What's 10 say, Clint?
Number 10 says, "The provisions of this resolution shall be subject in all aspects to the act and any amendments thereto, and the allocation provisions herein relating to the COVID project allocation area shall expire on the date that is 25 years after the date on which the first obligation is occurred to pay principal and interest on bonds or lease rentals or leases payable from tax abatement revenues derived from the Beckovich project allocation area in accordance with the act."
So the state law says you can only have an allocation area of 25 years.
Right.
That's the max. This
Okay.
grants you the max once it's paid off, you can claw it back.
Your TIF expires in 25 years, that's all that's saying. From the date of debt issuance. There's a whole bunch of legal language in there that says the state, based on certain state code, this TIF area, which you would be establishing, expires 25 years after that initial debt, i.e. the $5 million COVID bond is issued. It doesn't mean the COVID gets the money, it doesn't mean
It's paid off in 5 years and the next 20
20
are
years
profit.
is
Yeah.
TIF.
Well-
RDC.
What, again, those are lawyers that are paid by the word.
That's not the way it was presented to us before. It was presented, they were gonna collect that for the duration of the TIF.
No, the duration of the debt. When it's paid off, this can't be a windfall to the developer, as I understand. Ted, am I,
You're absolutely correct. The developer is capped at what they're getting. It is the par amount of the bonds plus interest.
Well, when I asked that meeting when I asked that question at the other meeting, they said they would continue to collect that till the end of the TIF,
who said that, Clint? Who answered the question?
I don't know. Somebody did. So what you're saying is they collected this in, enough to pay off this bond in 5 years, that'd be the end?
That's right.
Or 7 or 8 years?
Say 5. Things just,
Well, it won't be 5, but.
well, you know, I don't think it'll be 7, but if it, in theory, just hypothetically, if it paid off in 8, it's done.
Well, that's not the way it was presented at those meetings.
I think you misunderstood that, Clint.
Yeah, I mean,
I asked
I,
the question at the meeting.
to who? I mean, and I'm not, you know, that's,
I think it was Buzz.
well,
It was Buzz.
it's possible,
And
but,
it's possible that Buzz misunderstood your question and therefore didn't answer it.
right, because legally, they
There's
can't
no way,
benefit from
yeah.
it. That's not,
Not
and that's
an
why the lawyer did put in per the act, according to the act, I mean, because the act says
Yeah, okay.
you can't profit.
If you're giving away deals like that, you're gonna get over by the knocks on the doors.
We're not doing that.
Okay, Clint, did that help?
Yeah, that helps. That makes
Okay,
it a lot better.
anyone else have any questions, comments? Brandy, Angie, chime in, don't be bashful.
It's cold.
Okay.
I'm just curious, because we never did approve the 5 million tip. And they said they would walk if it wasn't 5. If we went to 2.5, they wouldn't do it for 2.5.
Right, I remember that,
So,
because we asked them, can we do this for a lower amount? And they said
No.
it didn't pencil. So I think we're talking about a $5 million TIF bond.
I'm not on board for a $5 million tip bond, so
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out if they're gonna walk at 2.5, do we even need to go forward with this?
I thought we kind of approached that question at the, several meetings ago.
Well, it was addressed several meetings ago, and Buzz did come and talk. He said that he could agree with the 2.5 tip, but anything more than that,
Well, Buzz isn't the developer. And according to what maybe he told Clint, I don't know, I don't remember it that way. But,
well, I know that everybody wasn't on board for the 5 million tip. So if we're pushing it forward thinking that that everybody's on board for the $5 million tip, I don't think that is a correct assumption.
okay, that's fine. I mean, from day one, I've assumed it was a $5 million TIF because that's what they said they needed. That's what they said that their lender required. And I remember specifically asking, point blank, could you do 4? Could you do 4.5? Can you do anything less than 5? And the gentleman sat right there and said, no. If I can't, then let us know that right now and we'll find somewhere else to do the project because we can't do it at that. That's at least what I recall being told. But, and that's okay. I mean, right now, we're being asked to consider the bond engagement letter. And it does reference a $5 million bond, which I think is consistent with everything that's been said as far as the amount so far. But that's,
Now, once again, us saying yes to this doesn't mean we're locked into it, correct? Or is that what it means?
no, and Chris, the best that I could give that is if this evening, earlier, if the RDC approved their resolution, if the Plan Commission approved their resolution, and it did come before the council to approve those resolutions, even at that point, it's not a done deal. So that's not the final approval.
enough.
And so I want to be clear that, because I'm the one that made the comment, and I made it to you when you asked, does this mean
Yeah.
that we're committed? It just means we're moving forward. It's one more step on that chart that has to be accomplished before it's done.
Okay.
And there will come a day when it really is the last vote, and it's a deal or not. And we're not there yet.
Okay.
May I make a suggestion? Is it possible for the attorneys to rewrite this contract to say they're gonna bill it by the hour, not to exceed $75,000?
The reason I don't want to put that in is because if you do, then you're going to write a check for that hourly rate. The way this is worded, they're being paid from the bond proceeds at closing. I don't want to lock us into
So
that.
if it falls through at any given time.
Then we'll have to have that conversation. But I'd rather have that conversation that fell through
Sure.
instead of locking into an hourly rate now.
Agreed.
I mean, that's just, again, my opinion.
Okay.
So, okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, you said that we were going forward with it, thinking that it was a $5 million tip.
Yep.
I'm not thinking it's a $5 million tip. I'm thinking, you know.
If
from
you think
this
that you
perspective,
can ask the
2.5.
developer to take a lower amount and get the project,
I'm thinking we could say, or if it was even something, if we voted on across the council board, it probably will not be agreed to be above 2.5. Do we keep proceeding forward? And if it's a no, then it's a no.
well, we asked them that question. They said no.
And if it's a no, then it's a no.
Okay, and that, again, if that's, your personal opinion and criteria and you're gonna vote, that's fine. But
I'm just
right,
saying, because we were told when we voted on it originally to move forward, that we were moving forward, that we were still open for discussion. But now I feel like I'm getting cornered into saying that, I'm saying we're moving forward with the discussion of a $5 million tip, and that's not what was agreed upon. It was agreed upon to keep bringing it to the table for discussion. That was
Okay.
what I was, that's what I said yes on.
Mhm.
That was my understanding. If that was wrong, then,
well, and as I said a moment ago, this isn't the final vote. But if what you're thinking is at some point the amount of the bond is gonna change, from what I heard from the developer, who isn't here this evening to reiterate and say the same thing or say if it's different, they point blank said, if it's not that, we're done. And that's fine.
okay.
So I'm looking back at the preliminary resolution that the council passed, and as part of the exhibit to that, it was referenced as, up to a $5 million bond. So I think, at least from what was presented to you, that was the understanding that we were kind of going to go forward on that path until we decide, we're going to go forward on that path.
Yeah, well, and even if it said up to, that could include less than, but, and at our next meeting, I'm pretty confident the developer's gonna be here, and we can ask him these questions. But when they say what they've already said, and again, I'm just assuming, then we have a decision to make.
Then why do we have to wait for them if you're saying that they already said they won't do it?
You were here when they did.
If they're saying that they're not gonna do it any less than 5,
That's what they said. I don't know that I heard that wrong.
okay.
And I'm perfectly fine with the 5. Again, that's just me personally. And if you're not, that's fine. But right now, the engagement letter is for the services of bond counsel. And in the engagement letter, and not that that's a gotcha, I mean, we're not locked in, but
I
it's
get that. I heard
contemplating
you
a $5 million
explain it
bond.
The first time I got it.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, concerns? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No,
No.
Okay, we have a tie, because, and Brandy, I'm assuming that you're abstaining. So in this situation, when there's a 2-2 vote, we need a third vote, and that would be cast by our clerk treasurer. Yvonne, what is your vote?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries 3-2. The next item on the agenda are department reports. Steve, what would you like to report this evening? That's wonderful. You know what? I want to make a comment that's in your bailiwick, because this is how nitpicky I am.
Bailiwick, I like that.
In your domain, or bailiwick. At the roundabout, several weekends in a row, there have been signs, whether they were for garage sales, you know, handwritten, or whether they be by developers that are advertising open houses, this subdivision, that subdivision. I want to make it crystal clear, you tell me if I'm wrong, if anybody were to put a sign on the inside of the roundabout, in the dead grass, that they should be removed.
The question was asked by me and answered, it's a public right of way.
Well, it's a public right-of-way, but if you put signs in the middle,
sorry.
now you're making a safety hazard.
Comment on that from the planning commission. It's a very strict rule where political signs can be advertisement signs and is related to the right of ways and everything else. So my personal opinion, without researching it, I don't think they can do it.
Well, and now, if you go around, the roundabout, and these same developers, subdivision signs, they'll put 10 in a row. If they're on the outside, I mean, technically, they're probably where they shouldn't be, and they've got a lot of subdivisions, they're trying to, you know, sell lots and sell houses, whatever. And then they put them out on a Friday night, and the same guy comes and picks them up on a Sunday night, I mean, they're for the weekend. Me personally, if they're on the outside of the roundabout, that doesn't concern me, because it doesn't block your vision. But you put those signs in the middle of a roundabout, now they're obstructing view, traffic flow, and that's a safety concern. So, I mean,
Well, and you initially put the question to me because I was pretty much with this project from conception to, you know.
well, and you're the
Here-
street
here
commissioner,
toward
what do
the
you
end.
think?
I specifically asked the project manager for Strand, who is our consultant on the project, because the first weekend that site was in, we had a bunch of signs up there. I didn't like it. I don't think very many people did. And he said, I said, is that public right of way where they put them signs? He answered, yes.
Well,
I can revisit it with him.
well, you know what,
Yeah.
not even necessary, because I'll put it out there that if I go by the roundabout, whether it's a weekday or the weekend, if there's a sign inside, I promise I'm gonna stop and throw it away. I mean, I'm just telling you right now, because it bothers me.
That's that.
Is it?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, then, I don't know who took them.
What he said is down?
But I'll take the signs out of the center and I'll put them on the ground on the outside. I'm gonna relocate them because that's town property. And there used to be a time that they would put them on this corner. I guarantee you they don't put, because somebody moved them. They stopped putting them there. And that's, but thank you. I won't take them. I won't throw them away, but they won't stay where they're at. So, again, just, they shouldn't be in the center of a roundabout.
No, I'm not a fan either.
Okay. Yvonne?
Yes, I have a couple of quick ones, and one that may take a little longer. Our in-person audit is just about completed. I got a phone call that they're about wrapped up, that didn't have any further questions. They basically found everything, but they're writing up their, whatever nice letter that hopefully that says that they did find it. Jenny worked really hard on giving them all the information, continually answering all their questions, pointing out that their questions they had already answered in their own paperwork on forms, it was kind of funny.
But I disagree with you. I hope their findings come back and they say that employees really shouldn't steal raises that were allocated to other employees so that their retirement can be higher.
It's exactly what it was about, but I don't know if they did it in the right year.
When wages were inflated 3 years before retirement so that retirement could be higher.
Yes, I did.
I
2
did.
years ago.
That sucks, because it took hours and hours and hours of our time. But it is completed, so we will get the letter hopefully by the next meeting. I'll be able-
What years did they look at?
The last 20 and the beginning of 20.
Yeah, so they didn't go far enough back to find that. Okay, thank you.
It's such crap.
A couple of, a year or so ago, we dealt with the Life Services EAP program that we have in place where you can call an 800 number as an employee if you have concerns about something or you need some help. I got a utilization report for this quarter. If you would like it, I will give you a copy. There's been zero use of it in the second quarter. So just so you're aware, if you would like a copy, I have it. Finally, we're starting on the budgeting. Jared and I and Jenny had our first meeting to kind of plan when we will have the adoption, backing up a couple of weeks to when the public hearing will take place. The notice of public hearing needs to be advertised, the budget workshop, and then getting closer to now, the finance committee meeting. We are hoping for the finance committee to meet on July the 26th, which is July the 26th on Tuesday, or on August 2nd on a Tuesday. So whomever from the council is going to attend that, I'll send out an email so it makes a lot more sense, but please indicate which date would work for you. That Tuesday meeting, we're trying to do it in the daytime. Jared will be here, all the department heads will be here, and everybody will be hopefully prepared with, whatever projects they're gonna want to do next year, whatever's important. We need to talk about salaries, we need to get salary ordinance together. So all of that will be part of that finance committee meeting. So whomever would like to attend that, July the 26th on a Tuesday or August the 2nd on a Tuesday. If that doesn't work for anybody, then let me know as soon as possible. We can try to come up with a different date.
What date is it?
July the 26th, which is coming up really fast, that's next week. And that may not work. Okay? Or August the 2nd.
Won't be for me.
That would allow us to do the budget workshop on a Thursday evening, the 11th of August, if at all possible. That would be, with everybody. And the notice of public hearing would be published about a week or so later. And then the budget public hearing would potentially be on the 7th of September. The adoption would take place on the 5th of October, and then it would be submitted before the due date on November.
Yeah, November, the last day to adopt is November 1st, and I think November 6th is the, but, yeah, if you follow that schedule, the submission would be next
Timely.
couple of days, right? Yeah, you would be ahead of.
So, Yvonne, what time on the 26th or the 2nd?
Well, that kind of depends on when, did we set a time? We set a time.
I think we tentatively said like 10 or
10 in the
10:30,
morning or
because I
something
know
like that. Oh, we talked about bringing them.
They're usually pretty comprehensive.
And I had gotten a request from, I believe, Angie and Bob to allow for more time than we did last year. That's why we moved it towards the morning, so that we could have the day.
And is it either the 26th or the 2nd,
Yes.
or is it
Yeah.
both?
No,
So we need to
pick
pick one.
day.
Okay. Do you have a preference?
Doesn't matter to me, and everybody who's the department heads are employed by you all, so we will be there, period.
Is this for all of council or just?
No,
Okay.
usually you have two council
All right.
members present. is what I
Right.
And then we'll do the budget workshop with all of the council.
understand. Yeah,
Okay.
so the budget workshop is separate from the finance.
When is the workshop planned for?
August the 11th, at the moment, it's planned for that on a Thursday.
On an evening?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well,
Thank
and-
you.
And the reason I asked the time is because I checked my schedule. I know August the 2nd, I have a conflict because I'll be sitting as a judge in the morning all day.
And this is also something, if you wanna just, you get there when you can get there. But I don't know how many council members we can have, is there a maximum of that?
Well, I think you have a
You can't have
quorum of
one?
3, right?
Well, you have a quorum with 3, Ted, is that, I mean, this is an informational, or no, it's actually discussing the budget. Yeah, okay, so we can only have 2.
I'm at the firehouse on the 26th, so I can't be there.
Yeah, and the 26th is out, and we're going with August the
Oh.
2nd.
So you all will have an opportunity, so the idea is that we've got a lot of numbers, you keep chipping away to come up with our budget, same process we did last year. So this is like getting the department heads and some council, and we kind of get it close. We're gonna have the budget workshop, in which it's gonna be interactive, so that's a time when, Chris, if you can't make it and you request a change, we can talk about it and see how it impacts the budget. And so we can still make changes through that point. It's when we start getting, well, yeah.
So is the
Okay.
one on August 11th gonna be for the full council?
Yes, that's the budget
That's-
workshop.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's what I'm saying, even at that point, we can have dialogue.
Right.
Okay, so do we have 2 council members that are able to make it on the 2nd?
I can go on the 2nd.
Anyone else?
I'll have to see, I have it on my.
I can make it, yeah.
I cannot.
I could
Okay.
probably make it, I think, yeah.
Okay, so,
Perfect, well, that was our preferred one, so I'm really happy about
Now,
that.
now what time was that?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
Donuts will be served.
Okay. Anything else, Yvonne?
No, that's it for me.
I don't see any
And-
other,
and Jim went home sniffling and so.
No-
he did
no
look
problem.
at it.
Davis COVID, WW.
Jesse, do you want to present anything on behalf of the police department? You're the fill-in for Bob, you're a little taller.
No, I didn't need any cliff notes for you guys, but other than that, Officer Board is doing well at the academy, and we should be getting return on investment next month. So
Awesome.
we'll be back on the streets.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we've run out of departments. So at this point, I'll open the floor for public comments. I know we've had a couple throughout the evening, but by gosh, there's still the opportunity. If anybody would like to add anything that they didn't say earlier, now's the time.
Once again, Dale Wagner, 4462 South 600 West. So I had some things. First off was on the TIF bond issue. And I had some questions as to how we got here. On May 18th, New Pal Council was divided on the TIF bond with a tie vote. So that's when Yvonne was on vacation, so we couldn't break the tie. So it got tabled for another vote. Somehow 2 weeks later, or on the first Wednesday, in June, which is June 1st, the town council passed the TIF bond resolution. So the TIF bond resolution came along with this timetable. And Clint had asked the question, how did we get here? So how do we get from voting for a TIF bond to getting here without any discussion on going this route? And what I can gather from this is that we're creating another economic development area for the apartments and giving them whatever specific amount it is. I'll just use the 5 million, so a $5 million TIF bond. So in some research that I did, the economic, or the Town of New Powell Redevelopment Commission, there was an economic development plan that was expanded, and it looks like the original plan took into the area for the, what do you call it, the base assessment values. So the expansion was for the hospital in 2000, so it made the hospital property the base assessment date for those parcels located in the 2019 expansion area is January 1, 2019. So the original area with the expansion is everything that's in, and these are your all's documents, everything in these green lines is the original area. With the expansion came out to 262 acres. So now we already have the apartment area in that, but now we're looking at doing it again. Isn't it just a matter of deciding whether or not we're going to do a TIF? Why are we paying $75,000 to go through all this again? And as far as the $75,000, it goes back to the question too, if they're getting that $75,000 from the TIF and it's all financed through that, what if the TIF doesn't pass? What if the apartment says, no, it's taken too long, I'm backing out? If they have no opportunity to recover their $75,000, they're going to come to somebody looking for it. So that to me is a concern. Another question is, if all this TIF area was already created and the base assessments are 2019, why is the redevelopment commission not collecting the increase in property taxes on those properties over all these years?
Because the redevelopment commission agreed and the council agreed on that bond project, the first bond project, the hospital bond project, to accept $50,000 a year. That's what they agreed to. And,
Right.
and it hasn't kicked in yet. I believe it will next year.
No first payment has been received.
Okay, so 'cause we're beyond the $32.
But we will collect money for like that fourplex that was built at Woodland Terrace. That whenever they start paying taxes, we'll collect the taxes on that.
That's a tax abatement, different.
Different animal.
Different animal.
So
No,
Dale,
they don't have a tax abatement on the new part.
Well, what new part, the one that they're
They just built a fourplex that
Okay.
as soon as they start paying
There's
taxes on
no
it,
abatement on that.
that
Yeah,
needs
so
to
that's
go
a
in our
year.
RDC.
Okay,
That's
so
not
also-
part
so
of the TIF.
what you're asking, Dale, as I understand it, there was an allocation area, whether it was in 19 or 20, whenever that was for the hospital. And again, as I understand it, is it 33 acres for the apartments? Well, I'm just gonna, it's close enough. The 33 acres that's for the apartments is in the overall TIF district, as is 232 other acres, or 230 other acres. What the resolutions do, what the whole bond project that's on the table currently is to create a new allocation area, a second allocation area, separate from the hospital, but now there's a separate one for the apartments. Because that wasn't done previously, it's included, so that's why we're spending, and it's not the town that's paying, it's part of the issuance cost that the developer pays, and that is to go through the process to create that separate area, allocation area, as I understand.
But
Ted, am I close?
be created the area, it's a TIF area.
Mhm.
You
But
have
it's
a
not
date.
an allocation area.
I think his confusion is the economic development area versus the allocation area. So the green box, I believe it's green, the economic, the big one, that is the town just went through and identified an area that they expect growth in. It's projected, this is what we think, we've identified an area. The next step is to create an allocation area, which then, like, stamps it in time and said, which is, I believe it's yellow on there, the hospital. In 2019, they went through the process and said, within the economic development area, we're gonna create an allocation area, and the base assessment date on those identified yellow parcels is January 1, 2019, that's the base date. So any growth on just those yellow parcels beyond that generates increment, which is TIF. So now we come to today, and the COVID has identified the other parcel to the
South.
south, and it's still up for discussion, but we're saying, okay, if we want to designate this as another allocation area, so now there would be two allocation areas, and preserve the base assessment dates, probably January 1, 2022, if it occurs this year. Yeah, I'm pretty familiar, yeah.
I think you're a little.
So what they're doing, the green is just, it's part of the economic plan. It's the big roadmap for the town, for the RDC, to give us an idea of where we think economic development is going to occur. We don't really get anything from that until we designate it as an allocation area, which is right here, which is the proceedings, I think, that are on the timetable that you are looking at.
If you create the area and you're not collecting any tax money from it until somebody comes along and asks for
So you designated.
75 to 90% of it.
You don't.
Why in the beginning, if the redevelopment commission looks at a big piece of property and said, if that had a street through it and some sewers, we could get it to develop, right? So, and that to me is what they did. They said, okay, here's 262 acres. So why aren't they looking at that then and saying, okay, that's our TIF allocation area. We're gonna start collecting the taxes on it so we can instill development in this area.
Because the RDC didn't declare the entire 262 acres as an allocation area. There's a huge difference between being in the development area versus allocation area. I mean, and that chart that you had, that's by statute. Those are the statutory steps that need to be followed in order to properly adopt a TIF project. Absolutely. And that's fluid. It just got bumped another 2 weeks today. So, there's nothing that says that's set in stone, and there's no gotcha, you didn't do this by July 20th. If you follow the steps.
I guess my question here is how do we get to this? Because there was no discussion to get to here between the two meetings.
Oh.
No open meeting
You
discussion.
want to know where that came from? That came from me asking bond counsel, because I've never done a TIF bond, what are the steps?
That's part of their role, that's what they do. It's just a roadmap. It's like Bill said, it lays out the statutory, I'm sorry to add on the phone. It lays out the rules, the procedures that must occur in order to affect whatever it is.
So, Dale, it's no different than, why did I drive to Castleton to look at their property? That's general fact gathering. That's what I thought was prudent to do to make an informed decision. I didn't as much as take a free water from them when I was there, but I did walk through their property and look at it.
I'm not questioning.
No, but,
I'm just
so,
asking
but no,
how
you're
we got-
asking where did this come from, and it's magic, and it just.
No, I'm asking how we got from voting on the TIF. We had a tie vote.
And I
was
did some
thinking-
background to
I'm
learn what
thinking-
are the steps.
I'm thinking at the next meeting, we're gonna have Yvonne here, if we have a tie vote again,
And we didn't have a tie
and,
vote.
but we were voting on something different. So,
Okay.
that's my question, like, how do we go from there to here? And then, like, I still don't understand if you're trying to get an area to develop, why you create the area, but then you don't collect any money from it. We have a parts store going in, we have a restaurant going in, we have, well, 2 restaurants.
Oh, more than that.
We're not collecting anything off of those as far as the redevelopment, even though it's in that area.
Those folks are paid, it's not an allocation
Because
area. Those people pay their taxes just as if there was no economic development area. It goes to the county, their state formula distributes whatever back the school gets, the fire department, the town, whatever the taxing authorities, you know, not
Well, why
everything is a
in that case
tip.
aren't they asking for a piece of the pie so they can put in a sewer? Or
Not
put in a-
everybody
put in whatever?
needs a TIF.
Just questions. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? Council comments. Let me start to my left. Clint, you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think I might say something here. At the planning commission, they approved the primary plat on, I was gonna ask Jim this, on that subdivision. Now, my question was, did the primary plat just include those documents they put up there, or did it include the covenants or commitments, which were never discussed, and which, at the planning commission meeting that gave the approval for the R2 and sent it to us, it was specifically said that all we were considering was the zoning. Is that all we considered?
Well, let me, Ron?
Sorry, you asking me? Sorry,
No, I was gonna add, because you probably know that process better than anyone.
Chris has a document too, I haven't, but I can't find it right now, Chris has it. But when we asked them to put these in, street lights, do this, fence in the pond, no HOA, I mean HOA for rentals and all of this, he sent that back and it was attached with an ordinance, so we said we're going to make a favorable recommendation to rezone from agriculture to our New Palestine R2 to include those additional things. And then we asked Ted, I want to make sure it's recorded and it's legal and it's enforceable, and it will be.
So
Well,
when
then how come
this,
at the meeting, all that was said was, we were just considering the zoning?
We weren't doing any bonds.
Well,
We can't do annexation, that's the council.
I don't think the covenants were, or the commitments were never discussed at all.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
I think there was a lot of give and
And you
take.
can ask Jim, because Roger responded and said, we agree to this, and then we said that's part of New Palestine R2.
And what I heard earlier, Roger said, there would be in 2 different places. There was a separate, I forget exactly what he called it, development commitments. Might have been the name of a document, and then there'll be, those same restrictions will be included on the plat that is recorded, so that the covenants, so they run with the land. So and either are enforceable, but it's gonna happen 2 ways. It's a little repetitive.
Well, those weren't shown up on that screen right there. See that screen?
Well,
Those were not shown on that screen during that planning commission meeting.
well, tonight?
Yeah?
Yeah, tonight was only the preliminary plat. Those
Well, you're saying
commitments
that
were,
includes the commitments?
those commitments will be voted on, approved, when the final plat is approved. Which also means they're still subject to change, as I understand it.
And that's
So-
what Ted confirmed, that if they're in the covenants, they can be enforceable by the town and the HOA.
Okay, and you know, the other thing, Clint, I would encourage, if you do have any questions, reach out to Roger. He's been really responsive, and, you know, he can tell you better than I can what he agreed to.
Well,
But those will be recorded
as
and they
far as
will
I
be
know, we
enforceable.
never discussed the commitments at a public meeting.
Well,
With the planning commission might have, and,
Well,
but all they were approving was the zoning on the property.
okay, and these are also voluntary commitments, because for instance, the no rentals, we can't make them agree to that. But they
Right.
did voluntarily, because they knew that was important to us. And I applaud them for that. The other, they're asking for no variance. I mean, the whole project stands alone on a lot of good fronts, you know, helping the drainage that's already there, that's a problem, that if anything, they help fix it. So.
Yep.
But ask Roger, because he can probably explain it better than anybody.
Yeah, I don't mean clinch you. If you have heartburn on something, put it out there. Don't just say we didn't discuss it. We did discuss it.
Well, if that would've came up on the screen at that meeting, I would've got up and said something about the commitments. That wasn't included in that, what we saw on that screen for approving that, primary plat.
That's correct.
All that was
Because
approved,
they're
all
not
that was
part of the
approved was
primary plat.
the lot configuration and stuff.
And
Which
we
is the
agreed a long
primary
time
plat.
ago, We're not gonna revisit, we started this in December, and then it got postponed to January, because we didn't have the return receipts and all that, it just kept getting continued. We agreed a long time ago, we're not gonna revisit every word and every paragraph that we started in December at the end, but it is part of the document. I can't say what the council did, but it will be
Well-
there. It will be there.
Let me put it to you this way, I've never seen a document that we got as a council that showed those commitments on that document.
The motion was made by Bill, I don't know who seconded, we can find that, was made by Bill. He read each one of those in the motion, and we voted on it and said, yes, we're gonna accept them from agricultural to R2 with these provisions or whatever covenants. It was part of the motion.
In plan commission. In
Yeah.
a plan
Planning
commission meeting,
commission,
right,
that's
not a
correct.
council meeting.
And they don't become a recordable document until the plat, the final plat is approved. That's when it'll be recorded.
Secondary.
Right.
So secondary plat. When the secondary plat, which is essentially the final, when that's recorded, that list of commitments will be recorded.
It clearly says if somebody tries to file it with the recorder, it's not valid without the secondary plan commission and then the council. Not valid.
Yeah. Does that help at
Okay,
all?
we'll discuss it on down the road.
Okay, that will come upon final approval, that'll be there. It's a recorded document that runs with the land and is enforceable by a lot of different folks. Chris, you have anything you'd like to add? Nope. I don't have anything to add. Brandy, you have anything you'd like to add?
No.
Angie, you want to add anything?
I actually have a question, if somebody could educate me, because being a nurse, I'm not familiar with all of the boards and commissions. I heard economic development and I heard redevelopment. Can somebody tell me what the purpose of the redevelopment committee, I mean, what exactly is it that they do?
What's defined by statute. And I'm not trying to be smart, but each one, the Economic Development Commission has statutory functions and responsibilities.
Okay, wait, time out.
Yep.
What does the RDC do?
The redevelopment commission does a lot of things. They are actually one of the most powerful branches of government because they have the budget for all the allocation areas. So they are in charge of redevelopment. They, you know, as he was pointing out earlier, when the funds for an allocation area come in, that comes into the RDC's budget. Now, the RDC is closed with a whole lot of power to do different things. They can enter into agreements with entities. They can swap land back and forth. They can give grants, donations. Basically, they're a subunit of government that has some basically power to spend the TIP allocation.
But only the money that they get through the TIP
Correct.
into the RDC. So it's limited in that regard. So
And how's that different from the
$50,000
Economic
a year.
Development Commission? What do they do?
That's a good question, and I really don't know. That's a bond council question. They're also in charge of creating certain economic development districts that can do certain things. The statute defines like a redevelopment area differently from an economic development area. A redevelopment area says, okay, this piece of land is, you know, not worth anything, so we're gonna be able to establish this as an area needing development, and we can give tax abatements in this sort of areas. Economic development area is a little different, but they serve similar functions. The the EDC doesn't have the power that the RDC does. The EDC is more of a, entity that sort of creates districts, my understanding.
Okay. Does that help, Angie?
Yeah, I just want to go on public record and just make it, because I've already discussed this once, and just public record for a second time. I just want it documented that I have an issue with Bill being on the RDC, and I wish that somebody else from the council would have stepped up to take that position. Not because there's anything wrong or anything being done that's wrong, it just, anything that looks questionable, because I'm all about transparency and making sure everything looks good. But with Bill being on, with Tharp as Tharp's attorney, and has that opposite corner for growth, and then, as Ted just said, RDC is a very powerful committee, and he's on the RDC, I just think it would be better if another council member would have stepped up and taken that position.
Well, he appointed himself.
Yes, I did, because by statute, the president of the council appoints certain members to the RDC, and yes, I did. And I will say 1,000,000 times, if I were against a development project, that's a conflict, because maybe I'm trying to steer it away from somewhere else to a property that my employer owns. That has never happened. The fact that apartments may go across the street from property that my employer owns,
That's included in the TIF district.
we're not asking for an allocation area.
Doesn't matter.
It does matter. It makes a big
Yeah.
difference. So
Not
whatever.
according to what I read.
I'm not making a vote that in any way benefits my employer, myself. I mean, the fact that I'm interested in what is good for the, in my opinion, the town, I mean, hell, that means anybody that lives in town has a conflict because they're
No.
looking out for the town. And I challenge anybody.
No, it just means if they live in the TIF, if they're in the TIF district, if they own property in the TIF district and have them monetary, that's what it means.
Well, that's great, because I don't live in a TIF district.
I didn't
don't
say
have any
live, I
interest.
said had a monetary interest.
Well, and that's fine.
Or lived in.
Hang on,
I
it was the council
personally,
comments, and I had the comment.
right, and I'm responding to your comment because you attacked me. And I'll let you
I did
know.
not attack you. Time out. It was my council comment. I did not attack you. What I stated was, you weren't doing anything wrong. I wasn't saying you were doing anything wrong. I just said it looked funny to have you on the RDC, a very powerful, as Ted just said, committee for the town.
Yep.
The only thing I said was, I wish another council member would have stepped up. I'm not saying for you to completely remove yourself because you're a real estate attorney. It would be nice if you were there for consulting purposes if the RDC had questions. You would probably be more than happy to answer those questions. I'm just saying, it would look better if there was another council member that stepped up for the RDC seat.
Is there somebody else you have in mind that would have the time and desire to do that? Because, I feel like I'm pretty tapped out as far as time goes. I know I don't have the time, so if anybody else, you want to take recommendations, would you like to do it? Because I know I don't have time. And then
Well,
if anybody's wanting to recommend things, but I don't hear anybody
What I
asking for
asked
solutions,
at the
just
last
complaining.
meeting was how Bill could be on with, he works for a company that owns property in the TIF district.
Yep.
And if you, when I look at that law, I'm not a lawyer, but it says anybody with an interest, a monetary interest in the TIF district, can't be on the RDC.
The statutory definition of a conflict of interest or
There-
a monetary interest doesn't include anything that affects me. It doesn't. And it's not splitting hairs,
Well, I
and
think
I'm
it
not
does.
worried about the appearance. Well, that's fine. Everybody has their opinion. But I'm not gonna resign from the RDC. I already regret that I was requested to and I agreed to step down from the Planning Commission. That's an entity that, as a real estate attorney, I might be able to lead some experience to, might be able to help. And that's fine, that's water under the bridge. But if I were to, as an RDC member, make a recommendation to spend funds in any way that affected or benefited myself or my employer, yeah, that's probably a conflict. Hasn't happened, won't happen. So, thank you, but
Well, let me throw out another scenario here. You're selling property down there for businesses.
not selling anything.
Okay, you're giving away property for businesses. You're leasing
You're
property
leasing,
for
there you go.
businesses.
Okay,
Okay, so say if XYZ comes to you and says, we want to lease an acre of your property and have you build us a building for our business. But we're not going to do that unless they put that 282 apartment project in over there.
we tell them
So
to
you don't
fly a
think you
kite.
have a conflict
Oh,
there?
if somebody made that comment, I'd absolutely have a conflict. And I'd tell
Well, I just
whoever
made
that, I'd tell you to fly a kite. Go find an acre
I mean,
somewhere
just-
else.
that could
Doc
happen.
Jones has an acre right across the street. He doesn't have a conflict, go there. That's exactly what we would tell you. And I'll also tell you this. Every lot in the property that my company owns is spoken for. There's no room in the inn. So there, whether that apartment complex comes or not, there's enough interest right now. That property will be 100% developed, with or without apartments. So if somebody were to come, heck, if somebody could, we want to go there, we don't have anywhere to put them. But if somebody did come and say, the only way we'll come is if those apartments are approved, I'd have a conflict. And I also know that we tell them, go somewhere else. But I like that hypothetical, is that would be a conflict. And if that scenario were to happen, we tell them, go find another acre.
Well, since you brought that up,
Yep,
it was discussed about Starbucks last year.
I can't say anything about anybody that,
I didn't say
Okay.
you discussed Starbucks. I said Starbucks came up as discussion.
okay,
And it was discussed that Starbucks was not interested in building there until they showed more movement on those lots. And
that
then-
is absolutely not true. Not limited to
Can I
those
talk,
lots.
please?
Well,
I
but-
gave you a chance to talk. I did not
Sure.
ask you a question yet. Let me finish my statements.
Okay,
You're defensive and you're not letting me finish.
I thought I'd correct you along the way, but I'll wait, go ahead.
Starbucks said they weren't going to build unless they saw more movement on that corner. That's fine. You can make a record of him shaking his head no, just make sure it's
Actually,
in it.
you-
I
no,
am talking.
Okay, go ahead.
That they would build on that corner when that showed more movement of stuff being built there. And so it was discussed that Taco Bell was coming in, but Starbucks did not want to be the one that would anchor that lot. So you can't tell me that with the apartment complex coming in, that that's not showing movement, that could possibly light a spark over on the opposite lot where Tharp's property is located. That would help Tharp in any way attract businesses coming. Because Tharp could easily just say, well, we have apartments going in over by the hospital, there is movement over there, that he's not gonna benefit from something like that. The only thing I'm saying is because there is that little umbrella of where it could be questioned, that's the only reason why I said it would probably look better if there was a council member sitting on it. That's it. I didn't say that you were doing anything. I just said, because of the fact that it could be brought up and questioned, it would just have looked better if there was somebody else that was sitting there. That's it. I'm not asking for discussion, I'm not asking for comments, I'm just saying this is what was discussed and this is what I'm basing it off of. That's it. So, I just wanted it on public record that I brought it up, that I said that there was some questionable place where you were sitting on there and thought it would be better for another council member to sit there. If you don't want to step down, don't step down.
I'm
I'm
not
only
going to.
making the comment that it looked questionable, and I wanted it on public record, that at least I addressed it and said something. And it's on public record. That's it. It was a council comment. It wasn't a fighting and throwing down, saying that you were doing something wrong or you were doing something crooked. Just said
Okay.
was
So,
questionable.
can I talk?
I don't know, can you?
Well, if you're done, I'd like to, because Starbucks said they wouldn't be first on the corner. They didn't know, didn't care one rat's behind about the apartments. They're looking at numbers in a community, globally. There's somebody else, Taco Bell's going on the corner. If Starbucks decided tomorrow, well, we're not first. They haven't. We don't have a signed deal. I'm not here saying Starbucks is coming, but what I can tell you is there's not a single tenant that's coming to our property that has said a project across the street has anything to do with them coming. Our entire community, I mean, the subdivisions are over here currently. That's what's driving economic development. That particular corner, in my opinion, is where you would want fast food restaurants and things like that. Not on Main Street, not next to the pub, not places where they're gonna be disruptive to residential areas. And like I said earlier, there's no room in the inn. Whether those apartments come or not, that corner will be fully developed within the next year to year and a half. We're finalizing those deals. I can't say company names because they're not signed and I'm not allowed to disclose. But I can say there's no room in the inn.
But you just said they weren't signed.
That's right. There's no, but if somebody were to call us today with an inquiry, we would say there's no room in the inn. We don't start negotiating with somebody and then say, huh, you didn't sign fast enough. Maybe somebody does. Maybe somebody across the street would be happy to have those tenants. That's fine. We'll do on our property what's best.
Well, I was looking at, if I could talk, is it my turn?
It's anybody's turn.
I was looking at this handbook for Indiana Redevelopment Commission members and their attorneys. This rule against conflicts of interest is broader than most statutes that govern conflicts of interest. For a redevelopment commission, a member must in effect never do any business at all with the redevelopment commission, which disclosure and abstaining from voting will not cure. Accordingly, when deciding whom to appoint to serve as a member of the redevelopment commission, persons who might want to sell property to or buy property from the redevelopment commission or to do other business with the redevelopment commission should be avoided.
Maybe that's why Dale wants me to do a TIF district on that corner. I don't know.
It is a
But it
TIF
sure as the
district.
hell isn't. No, he wants us to pursue TIF financing. Hey, we don't need TIF financing. We're not doing business with the RDC. Never have, never will. We're not asking for anything. Although, in 1984, when Tharp Development came to the town and said, would you run sewer to that intersection so we can develop it, Dave Book said, no, that's not the way we're gonna do it. You pay for it out of pocket, and then, as you overdevelop it, here's what you need for your capacity. Oversize it. When people connect, you'll recoup your oversized funds. That's what he said. That's what's in writing. 6 people attached, connected. Not a penny was paid to Tharp. We settled that before I was elected to the council because for years the town reneged on its agreement. But they did set a great precedent, and that is if a developer wants infrastructure to develop their property, pay for it yourself. So, Dale, Tharp's not gonna ask for TIF money. If we need to develop something, well, they are, we don't do apartments. So, again, that's great, Clint, that's a
Well,
great statute,
That's
and
still
it
in a
doesn't
TIF
apply.
district.
I'm not doing any business with the RDC,
Chris,
we're not,
Chris,
so.
you said somebody to step up for the RDC to not just sit there.
Well,
If
I
need to
said, is
step
that what
up,
you're asking for? 'Cause
I would
I'm-
step
I
up to
don't
the
know.
RDC and sit on the RDC board.
I'm just saying,
There are no vacancies.
Just
But we'll
recommend it.
note it, that you're willing to serve if there's a vacancy, but it's full. Any other public comments?
council comment.
How about a motion to adjourn?
We haven't gone through the
We
page.
did.
Oh, let's do
Your
claims.
favorite thing.
Oh, that is my favorite part of the agenda. I love claims more than
2 hours
Clint
late.
loves
Great.
projections. At this point, we're being considered this evening to consider claims 24,176 through 24,216 as presented in your backup materials. Is there, if we get a motion and a second, then we can have any discussion regarding individual claims.
Motion to approve.
Is there
I
a second?
second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion regarding the claims? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving claim numbers 24,176 through 24,216 as presented in your backup materials, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor of adjourning, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. We are adjourned.